Here are a couple different hip thrust variations. Now I have a more beginner video. This one is still, if you're new to hip thrusts, they're basically a hip extension exercise. So similar to a glute bridge where you're lifting and lowering your hips. Now, one thing to point out here, I'm trying to scoop the pelvis so that the tailbone kind of stays under. So I'm not doing too much pelvic tilting here. And then you're zipping up the core, so drawing the belly button in, supporting the low back. And then notice how I'm keeping everything straight, drawing the chin in slightly. To then add some weight, which the glutes are very strong muscles. So adding weight is important. The sandbag is always my go-to. I love this version. Notice how I have my hands behind my head to support my neck. The ankles are under the knees. If you feel too much hamstring, you can try to walk your feet out an inch so that they're a little bit farther out to see if the glutes will turn on, and less of the quads, the top of the thigh. Again, trying to not pelvic tilt so much. And then another thing with hip thrust, you can work in full range of motion or partial range of motion. So here I stopped going all the way down and I'm just working that top range. So play around with your hip thrust. You can do full range of motion or those partial lifts. Another version, if you don't have a sandbag, is to use a dumbbell. It's kind of annoying, but you'll surprise yourself with how strong you are lifting. This is like I think an 85 pound dumbbell. I'm also using a slightly lower backrest here. The benches sometimes are a little too tall for me, so I use these crash pads to elevate my upper body. Again, notice my head. I'm looking forward the whole time, trying to keep the spine neutral, belly button in, pressing through the heels. And then finally, we come to the barbell hip thrust. Now, always use a bar pad to protect your hips, and you might need to play with a couple different setups first to find the one that feels best for you. I prefer these crash pads. You might prefer a bench. There's a bunch of different ways, and so you can either talk to me or another fitness professional to figure out the perfect setup for you. Hip thrusts are also a lot of setup, these barbell hip thrusts. So most gyms have some sort of machine that can also do this similar hip thrusting, hip extension motion. Start out light always, and then work up from there. We don't need to go heavy, 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 at least at first, protecting the low back always, making sure that the positioning feels best for you. I have another setup here that I filmed where I used a higher bench, and then in order to get myself up on the bench and have a proper positioning, I elevated the plates. So that's another way that you can get the right positioning in. You might actually need to elevate the barbell anyway if you feel like you can't slide the bar over your thighs in a seated position. So you want to get that bar in place before you thrust up. Making sure you do a little squeeze, trying to get full extension at the top, adding any holds or pauses if necessary. It'll burn, but it'll be worth it.